Judge insults black woman in court, shocked when she walks in the next day as his new boss. A single moment can change the entire course of someone's life. In a bustling Chicago courtroom, a fiery exchange unfolds between an arrogant judge and a poised black woman, triggering a ripple effect no one saw coming. The air is thick with tension as the judge hurls a barrage of belittling remarks, convinced of his absolute power. Onlookers gasp at the injustice, yet no one dares speak up in the face of the gavel's authority. Little does the judge realize that by tomorrow, his world will be turned upside down. The very woman he humiliated in open court is about to reappear, this time in a position he never imagined, his new boss. Judge Gregory Montclair was not always the figure of stern authority he projected from his bench at the Cook County Circuit Court in Chicago, Illinois. As a boy, he grew up in the affluent suburbs, attending prestigious prep schools where the lines between rightful confidence and indulgent arrogance gradually blurred. By the time he finished law school, he attended Northwestern University's Pritzker School of Law. He had grown accustomed to seeing himself as a cut above everyone else. From the moment he donned the black robe, his sense of entitlement only deepened. In his courtroom, Judge Montclair insisted on formality to the point of intimidation. Plaintiffs, defendants, and attorneys alike were commanded to stand at attention and address him with unwavering deference. He derived satisfaction from this display of power, from the crisp echo of the gavel to the hush that descended the moment he entered the chamber. Any slight deviation from protocol was swiftly and publicly rebuked. Yet, beneath the surface, rumors circulated about the judge's tendency to single out certain groups. More than one lawyer or courthouse staff member whispered that his criticisms fell harshest on women, especially women of color. Some chalked it up to unconscious bias, others to deep-seated prejudice. Either way, these criticisms never made it far. The judge's position shielded him from genuine accountability. All of this had been building for years, forming a thick layer of conceit around him. That morning, as he presided over a civil case involving an alleged contract dispute, his annoyance level rose with every passing moment. The attorney's arguments bored him. The plaintiff was a local entrepreneur whose business partner accused her of breaching a joint venture agreement. Judge Montclair felt the proceedings were beneath the intellectual challenge he craved. His court clerk, visibly uneasy, handed him the next case file. He glimpsed at it with an exasperated sigh, anxious to finish and move on to his next hearing, one that ironically would transform the course of his life. A hush fell in the courtroom as a new attorney approached the podium. She was young, confident, and black. Dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, her hair elegantly swept back, she offered a polite greeting. "Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Vanessa Gray. I'm here representing the defendant." Judge Montclair gave her a perfunctory glance and didn't hide his disdain for what he presumed was inexperience. "You'd be wise to proceed swiftly, Miss Gray," he snapped. "My time is valuable." Vanessa remained composed. "Yes, Your Honor. I intend to be brief but thorough." From the start, Vanessa's arguments were clear, methodical, and filled with references to actual legal precedents. She cited rules from the Illinois Supreme Court, pointed to existing cases from the appellate court, and presented her evidence in an organized manner that showed obvious dedication. Despite her skillful oration, Judge Montclair's face remained stony, his eyes narrowed in disapproval. He interjected constantly, demanding that Vanessa simplify her explanations. When she tried to clarify a point of law, he dismissed her with a patronizing wave of his hand. As the case progressed, the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. The judge leaned forward, ignoring the substance of Vanessa's evidence. Instead, he questioned her capacity to grasp the complexities of the case. He rolled his eyes, sneered, and threw in subtle jabs that made the spectators squirm in their seats. Eventually, his frustration boiled over. "Miss Gray," he barked, "I'm beginning to question whether you have the necessary experience to handle a courtroom of this stature. Did you even attend a reputable law school?" A murmur swept through the gallery. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, but her voice was steady. "Your Honor, I graduated from Harvard Law School. I've handled multiple cases before, including federal litigation. He cut her off, banging his gavel with unnecessary force. I'm well aware that many attorneys pass through those halls. Name-dropping your school will not impress me. A sardonic smile twisted his lips. Perhaps you'd like a refresher on how to properly address a judge. A few spectators shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa swallowed hard. This was no ordinary judicial scrutiny. This was belittlement, pure and simple. Fear and anger wrestled inside her. Her client gripped the table, outraged, but Vanessa discreetly signaled them to remain calm. She refused to be dragged down to the judge's level, but the tension was palpable. Everyone sensed that something deeper, something more ominous than a mere legal disagreement, was unfolding. Court adjourned for the day with little resolution in the matter, but the humiliating remarks of Judge Montclair reverberated long after the gavel fell. Legal interns whispered among themselves, attorneys exchanged worried glances, and staff scurried out of the courtroom in hushed disbelief. In the hallway, Vanessa found herself the subject of hushed apologies from bystanders. A few lawyers who had witnessed the exchange told her how stunned they were at the judge's hostility. One public defender, a middle-aged woman who had faced Montclair's temper before, put a comforting hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," the woman said softly. "This judge is notorious for picking on folks he considers easy targets. I wish I could say it gets easier." Vanessa mustered a polite smile. "I appreciate the concern, but trust me, I know how to handle hostility. I just hope the law stands above any bias in his ruling." She kept her composure externally, but inside she seethed at the disrespect. Vanessa Gray had not overcome countless challenges, financial constraints, the struggles of being a first-generation law student, the often lonely path of climbing the legal ladder in predominantly white spaces, just to be belittled by a man in a robe. She remembered late nights in Harvard Law Library, poring over case books while working part-time to cover expenses. She remembered the heartbreak of losing her father unexpectedly during her first year of law school and forging ahead in his memory. She recalled the sting of subtle racism, the microaggressions, and how she had vowed to ensure no one could ever call her unprepared or undeserving. The court transcripts wouldn't reveal it, but that day in Judge Montclair's courtroom, her dignity had been assaulted. Worse yet, there was precious little she could do. Judges held immense power, power that could shape or break careers. Still, her mother's voice resonated in her mind, urging her never to stoop to the level of her adversaries, to remain steadfast in her goals. Vanessa walked out of the courthouse that evening, feeling a swirl of emotions, but her posture was erect, her stride calm. She had no way of knowing her life was on the brink of a dramatic change, one that would cause the arrogant judge to confront his own words and face the consequences of his disrespect. That very night, as Vanessa tried to decompress, she received a call from an old mentor, Professor James Calloway, who had once taught her civil procedure at Harvard. He was now heading a significant initiative with the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts. This program sought to increase diversity and ethical accountability in the state's judicial system. Over the phone, his tone was urgent but encouraging. "Vanessa," he said, "your name came up in a meeting this afternoon. We're looking for someone with both grit and intelligence to spearhead a new oversight committee here in Chicago. It's an opportunity to ensure ethical practices are upheld across all levels of our judicial system, especially in the more contentious circuit courts." I immediately thought of you. Vanessa's mind raced. "I'm honored, Professor, but I'm not sure I have the seniority for such a position." He dismissed her reservations with a laugh. "Seniority is not what we're after. We need vision, conviction, and a willingness to push back against the old guard. You'd be working directly under the chief judge of the circuit court, assisting them in revamping ethical compliance. It's not exactly a job for the faint of heart." Listening carefully, Vanessa realized this was more than just a role on some committee. The newly appointed chief judge, renowned for championing reforms, was launching an ambitious campaign to hold judges accountable for their behavior on the bench. everything from potential corruption to biases in court proceedings. This was, in short, an avenue for real, systemic change. And it wasn't purely symbolic. The powers given to the new Oversight Committee included a direct line to the Chief Judge's office, the authority to recommend sanctions, and even the capacity to trigger formal investigations into instances of judicial misconduct. As Vanessa hung up the phone, she felt a powerful mixture of apprehension and excitement. This position would place her at a crossroads, able to shape rules that not only targeted unethical actions, but also zeroed in on deep-seated prejudices. She was eager to accept, but took a moment to reflect. Could she truly step into such an influential role so early in her career? By the time her head hit the pillow, her resolve was set. "I might still be new," she whispered to herself, "but maybe that's exactly what this system needs." 2 days later, Vanessa arrived at the Cook County Circuit Court complex for her first official day with the Oversight Committee. Her new job title, Special Counsel for Judicial Ethics and Accountability. She had spent the previous night preparing briefing binders, reviewing past disciplinary cases, and planning her strategic approach. The atmosphere in the courthouse was far different from when she had last been there as a litigating attorney. Now she was part of the administrative leadership. Armed with an official ID badge and a pass granting her access to restricted offices, she made her way through winding hallways to the office of the Chief Judge, the Honorable Darlene Whitfield. Judge Whitfield greeted Vanessa with a warm handshake. Tall and poised, with silver hair and a commanding presence, she was known for her unwavering commitment to justice, including championing diversity within the court system. She offered Vanessa a seat, and for the next hour, they discussed the broad outlines of the ethics initiative. "We've had far too many complaints about judges abusing their authority," Judge Whitfield explained. "Some display outright biases in their rulings, others belittle attorneys in ways that skirt professional conduct guidelines. Our aim is not to launch a witch hunt, but to ensure dignity, fairness, and proper decorum." Vanessa nodded, recalling her own harrowing experience days prior. If only Judge Montclair could see her now. If only he knew that the woman he had insulted was setting the foundation for this new era of ethical oversight. But it was only day one. She had no illusions that real change would happen overnight. Judge Whitfield handed her a thick stack of case files. "These are past complaints that never saw formal investigation," she said. "We're giving you authority to reopen or dismiss them at your discretion. I trust your judgment." Feeling a surge of pride, Vanessa thanked her. She realized this was exactly the role she was destined for, an opportunity to champion accountability, to right the wrongs that had slipped through the cracks. She thought back to the judge's humiliating words and silently vowed that no attorney, no person, would ever have to endure such indignities without recourse. While Vanessa was settling into her new office, an oblivious Judge Montclair proceeded with his typical routine. Fresh from a short vacation he had taken after that fateful court session, he strode into the courthouse with the same imperious confidence. He greeted some staff with lukewarm courtesy, ignoring others entirely. As he approached his courtroom, he noticed a sign announcing the launch of the new Committee on Judicial Conduct and Accountability, championed by Chief Judge Darlene Whitfield. His eyes scanned the sign with a scoff. Another bureaucratic attempt at policing the bench, he muttered under his breath. What do they think they'll accomplish? He dismissed the initiative as mere posturing. He had dealt with similar committees over the years, always emerging unscathed. After all, in his mind, the legal system thrived on strong personalities. He believed harsh criticism was part of shaping attorneys to handle adversity, an approach he liked to label tough love. The notion of an oversight entity investigating how he spoke to lawyers, especially ones he deemed incompetent, felt like an intrusion into his domain. But a flicker of unease cut through his bravado. The new sign indicated that the committee had direct backing from the chief judge, which he knew meant they had real teeth. Still, he comforted himself that any complaints lodged against him would go nowhere, as usual. He had tenure, experience, and a strong track record of case resolutions. He told himself that no one could truly challenge him. That same morning, a colleague on the bench, Judge Avery Kendall, struck up a conversation about the new oversight initiative. Over coffee in the judge's lounge, Kendall remarked, "Word is that the special counsel they hired is quite formidable. I hear she's from Harvard, got stellar recommendations. She's younger than we are, but rumor has it she's not intimidated by anyone." Montclair let out a derisive laugh. "I've seen many bright-eyed upstarts. They come in thinking they'll change everything, only to realize how deeply rooted our system is. She'll likely get frustrated and quit once she sees the bureaucracy." Judge Kendall shrugged. "Maybe, but be careful, Greg. Times are changing." Montclair responded with a dismissive wave. "Trust me, Avery. This is just more political theater." Little did he know that the bright-eyed upstart was, in fact, the very attorney he had belittled in court. And even less did he know how drastically his world was about to crumble. Later that afternoon, Vanessa was going through old misconduct files in her new office. She discovered numerous allegations against Judge Montclair, mostly from attorneys who felt they had been targeted because of their gender or race. While some allegations seemed vague or based on frustration with a negative ruling, a troubling pattern emerged from the testimonies. Witness after witness described the same tactics: belittling remarks, unfair interruptions, a refusal to consider legitimate motions, open suspicion of female attorneys' competence, and racially coded language when addressing attorneys of color. Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. Her gut told her she was looking at a systemic abuse of authority. In a folder from nearly 3 years ago, she found a complaint filed by a Latina public defender, accusing the judge of openly mocking her accent and insinuating she was out of her depth in a felony trial. It had been dismissed without investigation due to lack of evidence. Another complaint from a black female prosecutor alleged that Judge Montclair had criticized her emotional tone in a routine motion hearing. Again, it was tossed aside without further review. Vanessa noticed that no meaningful follow-up had been done. Witness statements weren't taken. Transcripts weren't reviewed. The notation simply read, "No action warranted." She felt anger rise within her. She also wondered how the system had failed these attorneys. Had they known there was no safe channel to air their grievances? Had they feared that raising the alarm would endanger their careers? One detail leaped off the page. The name of the judge at the center of it all was the same man who had insulted her days ago. In that moment, she realized her personal experience was no isolated incident. It fit into a pattern of conduct that had gone unchecked for far too long. Over the next few hours, Vanessa pored over transcripts from Montclair's courtroom. She flagged at least a dozen instances that sounded egregiously biased. Her heart pounded at the thought of confronting him now from this new position of authority. But she resolved not to let personal vengeance drive her. This had to be about justice, about ensuring he didn't continue to harm others with the same impunity. She made a decision. She would reopen the complaints against Judge Montclair and commence a full inquiry. She typed up her initial findings, carefully referencing court records and verifying the relevant judicial conduct rules from the Illinois Code of Judicial Conduct. She would then present this to Judge Whitfield and the Oversight Committee. This was her job, and she intended to do it with uncompromising integrity. The following morning, Vanessa was set to introduce herself at a general meeting of the circuit judges. A hush fell over the conference room when she entered, her presence initially unnoticed by many. Judge Whitfield stood at the front, motioning for everyone to take their seats. "Thank you everyone for assembling here on short notice," she began. "I'm thrilled to introduce the new Special Counsel for Judicial Ethics and Accountability, Miss Vanessa Gray." There was polite applause, but Judge Montclair's jaw dropped in shock. He recognized her instantly, the young attorney he had mercilessly belittled in his courtroom. For a moment his mind spun. How was she here in this capacity mere days after their heated encounter? She stepped forward, and he felt a wave of disbelief. Her posture was poised, her gaze direct. "Good morning," Vanessa said, her voice calm but resolute. "I look forward to working with each of you to uphold the highest ethical standards in our court. My door is always open if you have concerns or suggestions." As she spoke, Montclair shrank into his seat. Only a handful of people in the room recognized what was unfolding, but their eyes darted between Vanessa and Montclair, sensing the tension. By the time she finished her brief introduction, Montclair's face was flushed. He stared at the table, wondering how to salvage his image. Every word she spoke echoed in his mind, a sharp reminder of how he had tried to degrade her competence. Now the power dynamics had flipped. Judge Whitfield beamed at Vanessa. "Miss Gray will be reviewing certain past complaints that we feel merit a second look. I trust you'll all cooperate fully. Her mission is to ensure fairness, not punishment." Montclair took a moment to collect himself, telling himself that even if she had some vendetta, he was a seasoned judge. He could navigate these waters. He convinced himself she had no real proof, that his track record would shield him as it always had. Still, a knot formed in his stomach. Deep down, he knew that if she dug deep enough, she might unearth more than he could spin away. In the days that followed, Vanessa tackled her new responsibilities with a sense of purpose. She interviewed court staff, attorneys, and anyone else who had filed or witnessed complaints about judicial bias. Although her role required broader oversight, the volume of evidence pointing toward Montclair's alleged misconduct commanded her immediate attention. She observed his courtroom proceedings personally, slipping into the back rows unnoticed. She watched how he handled each case, how he interacted with attorneys. While he seemed more restrained than before, subtle microaggressions slipped out whenever a woman of color approached the bench. He used condescending phrases like, "Slow down, sweetie," or, "Do you really understand what this motion entails?" His face remained impassive, but Vanessa could see the impact of his words in the way these attorneys tensed up or stumbled momentarily. For his part, Montclair tried to maintain a veneer of professionalism, but the presence of the new Oversight Council weighed on him. He felt scrutinized, watched at every turn. He grew paranoid, convinced that any small misstep would be logged and used against him. Staff members noted that his temper flared in private, behind closed doors. He left scathing notes to his clerks, blaming them for the slightest administrative mistake. In the lounge, he openly criticized the new oversight initiative, claiming it stifled judges' discretion and turned the bench into a breeding ground for frivolous accusations. Despite these vocal objections, Vanessa systematically assembled her case. Whenever she found a piece of evidence, she cross-referenced it with court transcripts and witness statements. When new attorneys confided in her, she reassured them that the committee would protect them from retaliation. Her calm, methodical approach won over many in the courthouse. Even those who initially doubted a young, relatively new lawyer could handle such responsibility came to appreciate her diligence and fairness. Yet Vanessa understood the perils of confronting a powerful judge. She knew Montclair was not without allies, especially among the old guard who felt threatened by reforms. She heard whispers that he was preparing to dig into her own background, searching for any shred of scandal he could use to undermine her credibility. She steeled herself for what she knew would be a grueling test, reminding herself that she was no stranger to adversity. 2 weeks into her inquiry, Vanessa came across a particularly troubling case file involving Montclair. It detailed the account of a young black woman named Erica Sanders, who had appeared before him for a juvenile court matter concerning her son. Erica had described how Montclair spoke to her as though she was illiterate, making comments like, "Do you even understand the law?" and, "Perhaps you should have considered your choices before you ended up in my courtroom." The transcripts showed a disproportionate harshness in his approach, and Erica's public defender had filed a complaint later, alleging that Montclair's bias influenced his decision to remove the child from his mother's custody too quickly, without exploring alternative solutions. Vanessa found Erica's contact information and arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the courthouse. When Erica arrived, she looked exhausted, as though life had weighed her down. Her eyes lit up with a mix of hope and hesitation when she learned the reason for Vanessa's call. Over steaming cups of coffee, she recounted that day in court, recalling how Montclair had repeatedly interrupted her public defender, refusing to consider potential relatives who could care for the child while Erica took parenting classes. Instead, Montclair had almost immediately leaned toward Child Protective Services' recommendation to remove the boy from the home. "I'm not saying I was perfect," Erica admitted quietly. "I was in a tough spot, financially and emotionally, but I truly believe Judge Montclair judged me the moment he saw me, like I was some unfit mother with no future. He didn't even listen when we mentioned my aunt in Springfield was willing to step in." Vanessa's heart ached at the story. "Thank you for sharing this, Erica. I'm going to look into your case. We're reopening several files, but I need to warn you, this process can be slow." Erica nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "All I want is for someone to acknowledge what happened." I felt voiceless in that courtroom. As they parted ways, Vanessa offered a reassuring squeeze of the hand. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This wasn't just about personal revenge on a judge who had insulted her. It was about countless people like Erica, who had been sidelined, demeaned, and possibly robbed of fair treatment under the law. Vanessa returned to her office, more determined than ever to see this through, no matter the personal cost. Word of Vanessa's intensifying investigation reached Montclair through back channels. A bailiff who was friendly with his staff had spotted Vanessa conferring with Erica Sanders. Concerned that Vanessa's inquiry might extend beyond professional misconduct into actual rulings, Montclair erupted in private, slamming his desk. He paced his chambers, fuming over the notion that his judicial decisions were being second-guessed by some upstart oversight council with a personal axe to grind. In a desperate bid to save face, Montclair reached out to old connections. He contacted a retired appellate judge with whom he had once clerked, seeking advice on how to discredit Vanessa's inquiry. The retired judge suggested Montclair file a complaint against Vanessa for overstepping her mandate, claiming that the Oversight Committee had no authority to question the substance of his rulings. Montclair eagerly took notes, planning his next move. He also compiled a list of attorneys who owed him favors, or who had benefited from his lenient rulings, hoping to garner statements praising his fairness. Meanwhile, Vanessa sensed the walls closing in. She received an anonymous tip that Montclair was trying to unearth any dirt on her. Her past was clean, but she knew how easily a rumor could be twisted to tarnish her image. To maintain her integrity, she meticulously documented each step of her investigation, ensuring she stayed within her official mandate, reviewing judicial conduct. She had no intention of assessing whether his rulings were legally correct, only whether his behavior breached the code of ethics. The tension escalated when a letter arrived on Judge Whitfield's desk. It accused Vanessa of pursuing a personal vendetta and called for an immediate shutdown of her unauthorized investigations. Judge Whitfield summoned Vanessa to discuss the letter. When Vanessa showed it to her, the chief judge frowned. "This has Montclair written all over it," she said. "But we have a process. I can't ignore this letter. We'll need to convene the Oversight Committee to review the complaint against you." Vanessa felt a lump in her throat. "I understand, Your Honor. I have detailed records showing I've followed protocol. I'm prepared to defend my actions." Judge Whitfield nodded gravely. "I believe you, but be ready. He's clearly on the offensive." A special hearing was scheduled to address Montclair's complaint against Vanessa. The atmosphere in the courthouse corridors grew electric as rumors spread about the brewing confrontation. Staff members whispered in corners, speculating on the outcome, while attorneys queued up to witness what promised to be a landmark face-off. It wasn't every day that a judge with Montclair's tenure was openly challenged by a newly appointed oversight council. When the day arrived, the hearing took place in a meeting room often used for internal judiciary matters. A panel of 3 judges and 2 lay members from the Oversight Committee presided. Vanessa sat to one side of a rectangular table, her back straight, folders neatly arranged. Montclair sat directly opposite, flanked by a defense attorney he had hired to represent his interests. Judge Whitfield observed from a separate seat, not part of the panel, but there to ensure fairness. Montclair's attorney presented a series of allegations, claiming Vanessa had overreached by investigating not just the judge's conduct, but also his judicial decisions. He painted her as a rogue bureaucrat, motivated by personal animosity ever since she had appeared before Montclair in court. The attorney even went so far as to waive a transcript of Montclair's original hearing with Vanessa, describing it as a moment of mutual frustration rather than harassment. Vanessa, keeping her composure, rose to speak. "Members of the committee, I'm not reviewing the legal correctness of Judge Montclair's rulings. I am examining whether there is a pattern of conduct that violates the Illinois Code of Judicial Conduct. This code mandates that judges treat litigants, attorneys, and staff with respect, free from bias. In his own transcripts, you will find repeated evidence of humiliating language, targeted belittling, and potential bias against minority attorneys and litigants." She then methodically presented statements from attorneys, court staff, and even Montclair's own clerks. She cited the code sections that he allegedly violated, pointing to specific transcripts and official complaints that were never properly investigated. Montclair's face reddened. At one point, he could barely contain his anger. He whispered furiously to his attorney, who tried to calm him. When Vanessa mentioned Erica Sanders's complaint, Montclair's attorney interrupted, asserting that juvenile court rulings were complex and context-specific. Vanessa nodded. "I'm not disputing the final decision," she clarified. "What I'm highlighting is the nature of the language used by Judge Montclair. According to multiple eyewitnesses, his tone was demeaning, and his words carried racial and class-based assumptions." A hush fell over the room as the panelists reviewed the evidence. Even those who had initially doubted Vanessa's claims seemed troubled by the volume and consistency of the complaints. For once, Montclair, who had spent his career behind a protective shield of authority, found himself exposed to real scrutiny. During a brief recess, Montclair caught up with Vanessa in a hallway, ignoring his attorney's attempts to dissuade him. With no one else around, he confronted her directly. "How dare you orchestrate this sham?" he hissed. "I've ruled on hundreds of cases, many involving attorneys far more skilled than you. Why target me? Is this just to settle a personal score for the way I spoke to you in court?" Vanessa met his glare calmly. "This isn't personal, Judge. It's about the litigants and attorneys you've disrespected for years. It's about accountability, something your position should demand." He let out a bitter laugh. "Accountability? You think you can fix this entire system by singling out one judge you happen to dislike?" She narrowed her eyes. "I don't dislike you, Judge Montclair. I'm reviewing legitimate complaints against you. That's my job. If you had conducted yourself ethically, there'd be nothing to find." His eyes flashed with a mixture of contempt and fear. "You'll regret this, Miss Gray." Vanessa maintained her composure, walking away without a word. She had heard threats before, veiled or explicit, and she wouldn't be cowed now. Still, the encounter left her rattled. She understood the precariousness of her position. A single misstep could ruin her career. But she also believed in the reforms Judge Whitfield wanted to implement. She believed the time had come for old systems of intimidation to be dismantled. In an unexpected turn of events, a new piece of evidence surfaced just a day after the hearing. One of Montclair's former law clerks reached out to Vanessa with emails suggesting that Montclair had privately colluded with certain attorneys to fast-track favorable judgments. While not necessarily illegal, the emails hinted at Montclair's willingness to show favoritism to those who flattered him or played to his biases. The clerk, a nervous young man named Robert Liu, met Vanessa in her office after hours. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he handed over a USB drive containing the emails. "I kept these because I worried one day I'd need proof," he confessed. "I tried to raise concerns, but no one listened. I can't keep silent anymore." Vanessa thanked Robert for his courage. The next morning, she spent hours reviewing the emails with her small team, finding references to judges owing favors, a network of backdoor communications that undermined the principle of open justice. Although Montclair hadn't explicitly tampered with evidence or accepted bribes, The emails showed a disregard for procedural fairness and a sense of arrogance that permeated every action. Armed with this new evidence, Vanessa updated her report to the Oversight Committee. She knew this could be the tipping point. Judge Montclair's pattern of questionable conduct extended beyond harsh language and subtle bias. It reached into potential ethical quagmires involving favoritism and extrajudicial communications. A second hearing was convened swiftly to consider the new evidence. This time the atmosphere was even more charged. Rumors buzzed that Montclair could face formal suspension or even removal if the allegations were substantiated. Inside the meeting room, Montclair's attorney tried to challenge the authenticity of the emails. But Robert Liu testified under oath, stating the emails came directly from Montclair's official account, with instructions that were borderline unethical. The oversight panel listened intently, flipping through printouts of the messages. Montclair sat there, visibly anxious, occasionally shaking his head in denial. When Vanessa presented her analysis, she demonstrated how Montclair's words in those emails aligned with the pattern of partiality and bias previously uncovered in his courtroom behavior. She concluded her remarks with a solemn note. The judiciary must remain above reproach. When a judge's conduct undermines public confidence, it affects everyone who seeks justice. After lengthy deliberations, the oversight panel announced that they would recommend formal disciplinary action against Montclair. The details of the sanction would be decided in consultation with the state's Judicial Review Board. A hush fell over the room, followed by a flurry of murmurs. This was a monumental moment. A longtime judge, once seen as unassailable, was on the verge of facing significant consequences for his behavior. Montclair looked stunned, as though the ground had shifted beneath him. In that instant, the reality of his situation sank in. All his bluster and intimidation had failed to shield him. He shot Vanessa a venomous glare before storming out, his attorney trailing behind, vainly trying to calm him. Over the following week, the courthouse buzzed with the news of Montclair's impending disciplinary process. A wave of relief and vindication washed over many employees who had endured or witnessed his outbursts for years. Some attorneys openly congratulated Vanessa for her perseverance, while others warned her of potential backlash from Montclair's allies. Yet the majority sentiment was that justice was finally being served. Montclair himself became a recluse, rarely emerging from his chambers except to preside over already scheduled cases. Even there, his demeanor changed drastically. Gone was the flamboyant scorn. Instead, he spoke with subdued caution. Every word, every action felt weighed down by the scrutiny he knew hovered over him. For her part, Vanessa remained cautious. The formal process was still unfolding, and Montclair had the right to appeal any disciplinary decision to higher forums. But a tipping point had been reached. The evidence was too compelling to dismiss as mere misunderstanding. She continued to meet with Judge Whitfield regularly, briefing her on the progress of the inquiry and preparing for the possibility of a protracted legal battle. It was during one of these meetings that Judge Whitfield dropped unexpected news. "We've decided," she said gently, "to remove Montclair from his docket temporarily. Until the disciplinary matter is resolved, he'll be on administrative leave. That leaves his courtroom vacant. For the interim, I'd like you to coordinate with the other judges to ensure coverage." Vanessa blinked. "Me? Oversee the scheduling of another judge's docket?" Judge Whitfield smiled. "You've proven you have the organizational and leadership skills for it. I trust you to handle this responsibly." Vanessa accepted the assignment, feeling both humbled and determined. She had walked into this courthouse weeks ago as just another attorney, been insulted by a judge who thought her incompetent, and now she was overseeing the scheduling for that very judge's courtroom in his absence. The irony was not lost on her, and it reinforced the incredible potential for change when the system's protective layers were peeled back. On what was to be Montclair's final day in his chambers, he summoned Vanessa unexpectedly. She hesitated for a moment before deciding to accept the invitation, determined to carry out her duties without fear. She entered to find him standing behind his desk. The office felt darker than usual, the blinds partly drawn. Boxes were lined against the wall, filled with papers and personal belongings. The sight of the once imposing judge in such a state might have elicited pity under different circumstances, but Vanessa reminded herself of the many people he had hurt. "You requested to see me, Judge Montclair?" she said politely. He nodded, gesturing for her to sit. She declined, remaining on her feet. He sighed, sinking into his chair. "Miss Gray," he began, the arrogance in his voice replaced by a weary resignation. "I want you to know that this isn't how I envisioned my career ending." Vanessa listened, offering no sympathy yet. He rubbed his temples as though the weight of the world sat on his shoulders. "You probably think I'm a monster," he said. "But do you have any idea the pressure judges face? We're expected to handle endless cases, navigate bureaucracy, maintain a perfect record. Sometimes he hesitated. "You lash out." Vanessa's expression remained neutral. "I understand stress, Your Honor, but stress doesn't justify demeaning people or letting bias seep into the courtroom." He let out a bitter chuckle. "You're right. Maybe I just lost perspective. Maybe I started seeing attorneys and litigants as obstacles rather than people." For a moment, the two stood in silence, the distance between them profound. He sighed again. "I won't ask for forgiveness, but I do ask that you remember me as more than just an arrogant judge." Vanessa met his gaze. "That depends on what you do going forward. If you take responsibility, if you help reform the system rather than undermine it, people might remember you differently." He gave a slow nod, glancing at the boxes. "Thank you for coming. He hesitated. "I suppose this is goodbye, Miss Gray." With that, Vanessa turned to leave. As she stepped out into the corridor, she felt a swirl of emotions: relief, sadness, validation, and hope. She realized this had never been just about bringing one arrogant judge to justice. It was about sending a message that no one is above accountability, especially in a system meant to uphold fairness. Weeks passed and the disciplinary process advanced. Montclair was officially removed from the bench. Though he wasn't charged with criminal wrongdoing, his judicial career was effectively over. The case became emblematic of how the new Oversight Committee, with backing from Judge Whitfield, was serious about its mission to purge biased and unethical behavior from the courthouse. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued her work, expanding the investigation to other judges with pending complaints. Her success in the Montclair case inspired more people to step forward, trusting that their voices wouldn't be ignored. Real reforms began to take shape. Mandatory bias training for judges, streamlined procedures for lodging complaints, and a formal mechanism for investigating allegations impartially. At an official ceremony to commemorate the changes, Judge Whitfield praised Vanessa's courage. "Miss Gray stands as proof that competence, integrity, and courage can triumph over entrenched patterns of misconduct. Her efforts remind us that the judiciary is here to serve the people, not tower above them." During the reception afterward, many approached Vanessa to congratulate her. Attorneys told her how the courthouse atmosphere had changed, how they felt more comfortable raising legitimate objections, more confident that fairness, not fear, would guide the process. Vanessa, humbled, thanked them for their support. She silently reflected on the personal journey that had brought her here, from the humiliating day in Montclair's courtroom to the moment she stood recognized by the chief judge. In her private life, Vanessa found a renewed sense of purpose. Friends teased her about finally embracing the system instead of railing against it. But Vanessa clarified her stance. "I'm not just embracing it. I'm trying to fix it." She continued to keep in touch with people like Erica Sanders, who was now close to regaining custody of her son. With Montclair gone, Erica's case was reconsidered by a more empathetic judge, leading to a new arrangement that allowed her to prove her capabilities as a mother. Vanessa also took time for self-care, something she had neglected for many years. She reconnected with friends, explored Chicago's art scene, and even joined a weekend running club to clear her mind. The burden of constant vigilance, of unending scrutiny, had lightened somewhat now that the system was beginning to align with the values she cherished. Yet, she remained vigilant. Overturning decades of complacency was not a task accomplished with one high-profile case. There would be more Montclairs, individuals who believed their robes or titles rendered them untouchable. Vanessa understood the road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but the victory against Montclair served as a beacon of what persistence and truth could achieve. Months later, Vanessa found herself in a reflective mood, sitting in the same courtroom where Montclair had once reigned. Another judge now presided there, one known for fairness and a respectful demeanor. As she watched the new judge skillfully manage the docket, she saw attorneys, young and old, men and women of all ethnicities, present their cases without fear of being ridiculed. The difference was palpable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Judge Whitfield. Heard the attorney in Montclair's old courtroom say it feels like a new era. Great work, Miss Gray. Vanessa smiled. She thought back to that first day, standing before Montclair's bench, hearing him question her competence as a lawyer. She had felt so small at that moment, so powerless in the face of blatant disrespect. Now, in the very same setting, she was instrumental in shaping a culture of respect and accountability. The system wasn't perfect, but it was better, and it would continue to improve as long as people like Vanessa refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. As she gathered her notes and prepared to leave, she noticed a plaque on the wall listing the names of all the judges who had served in that courtroom. Judge Gregory Montclair's name was still there, a silent reminder that even those who seemed untouchable could fall when their transgressions came to light. Vanessa whispered under her breath, "Karma has a way of catching up." Then she walked out, feeling a sense of closure and optimism for the road ahead. Every triumph over injustice begins with a single stand. Vanessa Gray walked into a Chicago courtroom as an underestimated attorney and emerged as a catalyst for far-reaching reforms. By challenging Judge Montclair's arrogance and bias, she helped reshape an entire judicial culture, proving that even the most entrenched systems are not beyond repair. The law, at its best, is a shield for the vulnerable and a check on those who abuse authority. With Montclair removed from the bench and new protocols in place, countless attorneys and litigants can now step into court without fear of bullying or prejudice. If you found meaning in Vanessa's journey from courtroom humiliation to overseeing real ethical change, be sure to hit that like button, share this story with friends who believe in justice, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss another tale of transformation. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive and reminds us all that accountability matters.